Welcome back. Complaints from Myanmar workers to NGOs are rising, from unpaid wages to poor working conditions. But some cases go further, with allegations of recruitment scams luring workers into illegal work, such as sexual services or illicit massages. Myanmar's civil war has worsened the situation, driving more than 1 million people to flee and leaving many vulnerable to exploitation. Aslam Shah has been investigating the issue over the past 2 months, and he joins us now. Aslam, great to have you with us. Now, you've been speaking to many of these workers on the ground. What have you found out so far?
Well, Angela, this all began when I spoke with a Myanmar national who was working as a cleaner, and she told me that she has not seen her 3-year-old daughter for over 2 years because it's risky for her to go back. And that led me to speak to more Myanmar nationals here in Singapore and also the organizations who help them. And what I found out is that there is a serious desperation among Myanmar nationals to not only leave the country, but also to not go back to their country. And just to give you a context of what's happening in Myanmar right now, there's an ongoing civil war. We're fighting across the country. Unemployment is on the rise, and costs of basic necessities are also going up. And since 2024, there's a conscription law put forward by the military junta, which could compel young Myanmar nationals to serve in the military, and evading it, they could serve a prosecution. So many of them flee and they look for jobs elsewhere. And Singapore is an attractive option with the strong Singapore dollar and what is seen as a safe haven. So they spend a lot of money, spend long hours and days to actually travel to Singapore. But once they reach here, they found out that the reality is very different.
A migrant worker shelter is not where many expect to end up when they come to Singapore to earn a living. For one woman from Myanmar, this is where the journey led. 28-year-old Diana told me that she fled her war-torn country after being promised a job at a beauty salon. But when she arrived, she was sent to work at a massage parlor instead.
When I stepped work, the boss teach to me how to massage the customer, but she teach to me only 1 hour. After I came to customer, she asked me to massage to customer. Yeah, and then customer request to touch his sorry.
Diana told me she was allegedly molested and fled to this NGO for help. She made a police report against the customer, and the case was later settled out of court. I was shown her job approval letter given at the time. It listed her as a food processing worker, not a beautician. The paperwork had been handled by so-called employment agents.
Sorry.
Another woman, Mary, paid her agent nearly $5,000 for what she believed was a beauty salon job. Instead, she told me she was pressured to give illicit massages. After refusing, she was sacked. The same agent later suggested another job. Again, she was pressured to do sex work. When she rejected, Mary says her employer slashed her salary by over 60% and loaded her with extra work. Mary is among a growing number turning to NGOs for help because of such alleged job scams. Complaints involve agents asking workers to do illegal work like these text messages. Cases are reported to the Manpower Ministry, and some victims take on temporary work.
Some of the women may feel coerced into performing sexual services that they did not promise to do because they've already paid such a large amount of agency fees, and they're afraid that if they refuse, that they will be terminated and sent back home. We're also seeing situations of wrongful dismissals where they get terminated after a very short while for very dubious reasons. So probably this churn is just for the agencies to earn recruitment fees from one worker, fire them, and then bring in another worker and earn the agency fees.
At another shelter, these two men tell me a similar story. Fleeing the conflict back home to avoid conscription, they paid more than $4,000 each, travelled for days by land to reach Singapore, and worked as kitchen assistants. The employment agents were not upfront about their work permits, and they later found out their promised 2-year contracts turned out to be false, and their job approval letters stated them as performing artists, valid for just 6 months.
Okay, အဲ့တော့စိုးရိမ်တဲ့ဆက်ကခုနလိုကျွန်တော် budget မရှိဘူး budget မရှိတဲ့ခံစားချက်ဖြစ်တဲ့အတွက်အဲ့ဒါတကြောင်မို့နောက်တစ်ခုကမြန်မာပြည်မှာလည်းကိုအဖေကကျမကြီးမကောင်းတဲ့အတွက်အဲ့အတွက်စိုးရိမ်နေတာလည်းတကြောင်မို့ feeling ထားပါပဲ
For cure, his parents were nabbed by the military back home. He has kept his situation here away from the rest of his family.
2023မှာအဲ့လိုပေါ့ဒီနိုင်ငံခြားထွက်ဖို့စပြီးစဉ်းစားတာပေါ့နိုင်ငံခြားထွက်ပြီးစဉ်းစားဒီမိသားစုရဲ့အဲ့လိုပေါ့ဝင်ငွေတစ်ခုရအောင်ဆိုပြီးတော့ဒီစကန်ပေါ်လာခဲ့လိုက်တော့
The difference with the workers from Myanmar is that they cannot afford to go home. They cannot afford to be sent back and to lose their jobs. So unfortunately, that means that they would do everything within their means to keep their job. You're having this situation of a mass exodus of people leaving the country, people that a population that you know are vulnerable and desperate. And when you have this scenario, basically, there's a very high chance of exploitation that will take place because people know that these are people who can be taken advantage of.
Now, Aslam, some of these stories of the workers have been quite difficult to listen to. But beyond the individual cases, when you speak to NGOs, what are some of the more broader concerns and issues that these workers have brought up?
So there's a range of issues, from unfair payment, unfair treatment, and also normally when these workers come to the NGOs, the full list of problems that are associated are not presented until the NGOs investigate further that there are misleading recruitment practices. And they are seeing more and more Myanmar nationals coming forward, especially in recent years. And we can see on the figures over here for Home, one of the NGOs who I approach, the number of Myanmar nationals coming forward to seek help have steadily increased. And this is not just the absolute numbers, but also the proportion of Myanmar nationals compared to the overall migrant workers who actually come forward to seek assistance. And at another NGO called TWC2, the numbers reflect the same trend, where they have spiked, especially in recent years, and the proportion have also gone up. But Angela, what I found out speaking to these NGOs and also to Myanmar nationals, that this is just the tip of the iceberg, because many Myanmar nationals, they actually do not come forward to seek help. They fear that they have to go back if their employment is not secured in Singapore. And under Singapore rules, migrant workers must be sent back to their home country by default when they are fired or when their work permit ends. So to not risk jeopardizing their employment and to risk real income going back to vulnerable families back home, they decided to keep quiet.
Yeah, so they really put in a bind here. You've also reached out to some of these alleged employment agencies. What did you find out?
Yes, so many of these agencies, I've tried to reach out to them through email, through calls, and I cannot reach them. Some of them, their addresses that they relay to the NGOs are different from what's listed on their websites, and some of their lines have been changed, and also their emails, there were no responses. So that was a very futile attempt.
Yeah, and in this case then, what are the authorities doing to tackle the issue? It can be quite challenging, right? Because some of the employment agencies are not really located in Singapore.
Yes, Angela. So the NGOs showed me the reports for the cases that you saw earlier and the correspondence. The cases were actually referred to the Manpower Ministry. And MOM actually came back to us with a statement, and they said that there has been no notable increase in errant employment practices affecting Myanmar workers over the past 3 years. And the issues, they say, are similar to those faced by other workers. And MOM also adds a few things that legal things that are in place in Singapore, where the employment agencies are legally limited in how much they can collect in advance when it comes to recruitment fees. And for valid cases, workers may be granted special passes until they are resolved. Otherwise, they must return home or go to another country, but only if the employer agrees. So in this case, you can see that there is a leverage from the employer's point of view, where, because this group of people are so desperate for a job, they can use it as leverage to exploit them, whether in terms of hours, in terms of salaries, or in terms of fees.
Yeah, so why then did the ministry see no notable change when, on the other hand, the NGOs are reporting there's a rise in such cases?
Yes, so the numbers are, the observations is very different from MOM's point of view and also the NGOs. So I went back to the NGOs to find out more. So what they tell me is that a lot of these Myanmar workers are scammed by dubious agents who may not be operating in Singapore. So little can be done, even if a complaint is put forward. And the NGOs actually urge Manpower Ministry to take stronger preventive action and pursue cross-border collaboration to prevent the abuse of Singapore's work pass system, like how you saw in the stories earlier. And as mentioned as well, that the complaints, many of the workers decided after reaching the NGOs that they do not want to file formal complaints because they do not want to risk their jobs or being blacklisted.
If the employer or agent says, I can blacklist you or I can make sure you don't come back to Singapore to work, that is actually a real and credible threat that workers take very seriously, because that means that they are not able to return to Singapore to work. So sometimes workers may decide, okay, maybe I shouldn't file a complaint because I'm worried that my employer will retaliate and I might not be able to find another job here.
They would unfortunately put up with situations of short payment of salary, wrongful deductions of their pay, even poor working conditions, just so that they can keep their job, because they know that if they were to say anything, the employer would just terminate their permits and they have to go home.
So, Angela, the burden of proof is also on the employee to show that the employers exploited them. And in many cases, this is very difficult to do. Investigations could take years, according to the NGOs. And there's also the Myanmar embassy, but many victims do not approach the Myanmar embassy because, hotlines were not manned properly as complained by the NGOs. And some were unsure if this could risk them being conscripted into the military when they return home.
Yeah, you've been talking a lot about the challenges the workers face here. And over 2 months that you've been doing this story, Aslam, you've also spoken to many in the Myanmar community. Can you tell us more about, apart from those who are scammed or exploited, what other issues does the community face here?
Well, Angela, I thought it was very important to actually get closer to the community, to speak to the people, because, this is beyond stats. This is beyond, reports as well. So there are no official numbers of how many Myanmar nationals are there in Singapore, but some second-hand reports suggest that there's estimated about 200,000 Myanmar nationals here. And I went to Peninsula Plaza on a Sunday, also known as Little Burma, where about 20,000 people, Myanmar nationals, are there on a Sunday. And I spoke to them and tried to get close to them. And I could sense that there is a serious fear among them about speaking about the war or even speaking about the military junta and their situation back home. These are real people with real lives, with real hopes and dreams, and a culture that is very rich. I got to also appreciate seeing their cuisine, seeing their language, which is also very poetic. In fact, if I were to say, how are you, Angela, in Burmese, it will be Mingalaba, Angela, which also translates to, may you be blessed. So it's a very rich culture with a very rich history as well. And spending time with them, getting to know them, what I also felt is a strong, resilient spirit and a togetherness as well.
In the 11th floor of this orchard building, dozens of women gather every Sunday. Once engineers, mathematicians and nurses in Myanmar, The war back home has forced them to work as domestic helpers here. And on their day off, they are here not to rest, but to train.
1, 2, 3.
They're learning how to care for elderly patients, skills they use frequently every day. Like taking vital signs, feeding elderly patients. For many, the training's to help them do a demanding job more safely and staying focused amid lingering anxieties back home.
Every day worry about our family in the civil or in Myanmar. So this worry is getting every day. At the same time, we have to take care of dementia patients to struggle every day. My father also passed away my home, but I wanted to go home. Cannot go home. My district is very, very worse in civil war.
Intense 24/7 caregiving work can also take its toll on these domestic helpers.
အဖွားအိတ်နေတဲ့အချိန်မှာတခြားအလုပ်တွေလုပ်ရတယ်ဆိုတာအဆင်ပြေပေမဲ့တစ်ခါလေကြာရင်အဖွားနေ့ဘက်ကိုမအိပ်ဖဲနဲ့ညဘက်တွေမှာနေ့ဘက်တွေအိပ်ပြီးတော့ညဘက်တွေမှာမအိပ်တဲ့အခါကျတော့တမိတွေအေးရေးပြတ်ထားမျိုးတွေလည်းရှိတယ်
That's where training comes in to help caregivers understand patients better and manage the demands of the job.
So that is why we wanted to explore more about that, how to take care of the elderly at home, about the elderly psychology and physically, mentally, how they suffer and how to protect the mentally injury for them as well as for the patient.
Lei Win is a former nurse and the program is run by members of the Myanmar community themselves. Training is structured and hands-on with practice sessions and close supervision. Some hope to get better jobs in the future. But for many, it is also a rare space to connect with others facing similar pressures.
Of course, I miss my family a lot. Start to save money. Even though I cannot go back, then I can bring them to Singapore and see them.
The classes can't change the situation back in Myanmar. But here on a Sunday, in a borrowed office unit, they found something close to a home away from home, a place to build confidence and community.
So, Angela, this is just one example of how the community is banding together to go through a difficult time. And for many of them, they do not know when or if they will ever see their loved ones again. And this takes a whole of society effort to really understand the migrant community better and their plight. And it's not easy for us in Singapore to relate what it means for a country to go through war and through mandatory conscription as well during war, where there's a serious risk of them, losing their lives.
Yeah, Aslam, thank you so much for bringing this issue to light. I've been chatting with senior journalist Aslam Shah about the exploitation of workers from Myanmar.